In my 30 years of raising dogs, I have learned some hard truths that most people won't tell you. From why I don't blindly trust veterinarians to the benefits of making your own dog food, I'm going to challenge what you think you know about caring for dogs. These controversial lessons can really change your dog's life, and some of them might actually surprise you. Let's dive right in. Lesson number 1 is I make my own dog food, cooked and raw. If you listen to the dog food industry experts, they will heavily lean on the convenience of dry food, and yes, of course, it's very convenient. But they also have whole campaigns designed to make you believe that you need to have a Harvard degree in canine nutrition in order to make your dog food balanced and complete. And that is simply not true. Making your own dog food is quite easy, and it's a lot healthier choice for your dog than even the best commercially produced dry food. Yes, there are homemade, gently cooked dog foods available nowadays as well, or pre-made raw dog foods, but those are quite expensive. If you can't afford that type of food, you don't have to resort to dry food. You can make your own complete dog food at the fraction of the cost. I have several recipes on my channel already, and that list of recipes is going to grow, so don't forget to subscribe and see for yourself how easy it is to make your own dog food. Speaking of food, did you know that garlic can actually be beneficial to your dog in small quantities? I used to add garlic to my dog's food consistently, and so did many of my dog friends, and our dogs had no ill effects from that and only benefited. We did that for the purposes of flea and tick control, because where I come from, commercial flea and tick medications were not always available to us, and it was quite effective. But of course, I have seen those studies that show that garlic and onions can harm your dog. Well, if you actually go and look and read those studies, you will actually see that they were using huge amounts of garlic in those studies. I would have to feed a 60-pound dog like my Viva here 1 to 2 pounds of garlic per day to reach those harmful levels. That's insane. Of course, I think if I was eating that much garlic myself, that would harm me too. But it doesn't mean garlic is poisonous. Any good thing in huge quantities can probably be hurtful. So I'm not encouraging you to start adding garlic to your dog's food, but I'm just saying certain things might not really be what they seem on the surface. Speaking of flea and tick preventatives, I worry about their toxicity a lot more than I do of that of garlic, to be honest. That to me is mind-boggling, that a medicine will stay in the tissues, in the system of your dog for at least a month and kill insects that try to bite your dog or even like come in contact with your dog's skin. I feel like that cannot be innocent and not harmful. Okay, so I want to be very, very careful. I don't want my dogs to get ticks and fleas, of course. So the lesson that I learned is that you don't have to do flea and tick preventative every month. First of all, I found a preventative, it's a pill form, and it's marketed to last and protect our dogs for 3 months. But what I realized is that even when I use it just once a year in the spring, my dogs have no issues with fleas or ticks. So I'm sticking to this schedule for as long as I can. If they develop a problem with fleas or I find ticks on them, then I might start giving that medication twice a year, but once a year works wonderfully. That's kind of a lesson that I learned, that of course I feel will benefit my dog's health long term, but also will save you some money because those things are not inexpensive. Now, when it comes to heartworm prevention, you definitely want to do that guy every single month. Heartworm preventative medicine doesn't linger in your dog's system. It's kind of a treat and get out of your system deal. So it is very safe, and also it is very necessary, because if you skip even a few weeks, you might end up with a dog having heartworm. So definitely stick monthly with that one. But flea and ticks is a different story. Oh, vaccinations. We had this whole drama with COVID, which brought immunity and vaccinating to the front of our minds, right? So let's see what we know when it comes to vaccinating our dogs. I definitely vaccinate my puppies against parvo and and distemper. I cannot tell you how many times I went to the vet for something and lo and behold, someone brings a puppy in with parvo. Parvo is extremely difficult to treat and it really can be deadly. So I definitely make sure that my puppies receive high quality parvo vaccination 3 times when they're young. And if you heard otherwise, maybe if your puppy comes from a breeder who is strongly anti-vaccinations, I urge you to do your own research and see if vaccinating your puppy and protecting them that way will make sense for you. For me, it does. As careful as I am with the big pharma, it definitely makes sense to vaccinate your puppies. Now, speaking again of vaccines, I just have hopefully proven to you that I'm not a crazy anti-vaxxer, but I do not vaccinate my adult dogs. Shocking. Except for the 3-year rabies, of course, that's required by law. And why is that? Well, as far back as 1999, Dr. Schultz outlined the duration of immunity for our core vaccines, and according to his studies, duration of immunity of our dogs for diseases such as parvo, distemper, and adenovirus is at least 7 years. 7 years of protection is what your dog gains once they develop immunity to these diseases. Will it start wearing out when my dog is 8 years old? Maybe, but I just have never had an issue with an adult dog becoming sick. Or I don't know anyone whose adult dog who has been previously vaccinated became sick with these diseases. The next lesson that I unfortunately learned the hard way is that I don't spay or neuter my dogs unless medically necessary, especially when it comes to young dogs. Spaying or neutering a dog before they're fully grown can actually harm their health. There was a study done with golden retrievers that has shown that in early neutered dogs, the incidence of hip dysplasia doubled. It doubled in the number of dogs who received this horrible disease. So, because my breed is German Shepherds, and I think that this is true for any large breed, I want to take every precaution I can to make sure that they don't develop this disease, and not spaying or neutering early is one of the major way of achieving that. There was another study that showed a significant increase in osteosarcoma, which is a bone cancer in dogs who were spayed or neutered prior to 12 months of age, along with many other health concerns that resulted from that. So if you plan on spaying or neutering your dog, consider waiting until they're at least 12 months. And for larger breeds, I would suggest even waiting until they're 18 months of age. That way they can grow and develop fully. I don't blindly trust veterinarians. I think after everything aforementioned up to this point, you kind of gathered that I will question what I'm being told at the veterinarian office. Not to be a contrarian and not to be a rebel, but only because I realize that a lot of veterinarians will try to push for early spay and neuter. They will try to push for yearly vaccinations that are not necessary. They will sometimes even recommend unnecessary therapies. I believe that vast majority of veterinarians truly care for our animals and want to give them the best treatment possible. But I also have to keep in mind that they were educated by big pharma. Their universities are sponsored by dog food companies. So some of the knowledge that they gain, if they don't question it, it actually is not necessarily in the best interest of the dogs. It's in the best interest of the companies that produce drugs and medications for dogs, as well as prescription foods for our dogs. So keep that in mind. That's where I'm coming from. And I am fortunate to know and go to several amazing, wonderful veterinarians who I'm so grateful for. And they will actually hear what I'm saying. And if I did some research independent of them, they will take that into consideration when caring for my dogs. It doesn't have to be even a holistic vet. Mine aren't, they're regular veterinarians, but they allow for a possibility of not knowing everything about dog care. And also they have experience with my breed. so that definitely is a huge bonus. I recommend that you also don't blindly trust everything any veterinarian says and shop around and advocate for your dog when necessary. Now let's move on to a more fun subject. I don't use a clicker when training my dogs. A clicker was invented in the 40s of the previous century, and it caught up with the dog training community in the 90s and became very popular. And for a good reason. It's a very useful tool that will mark the exact moment when your dog is offering the desired behavior. And so it allows us to delay our reward because we show the dog with the clicker when they did right and signal to them that because they did right at that moment, the treat is coming. So great. So why wouldn't I use it? Well, during a typical training session, I often will have in my hands a leash or even two leashes and a ball on a string and treats. And so to add another object to that mix is kind of a lot to fumble with the clicker. So I still feel strongly that marking a behavior is very, very beneficial and speeds up our training. And so what I use instead of a clicker is just my voice. I just use the word okay. It's like a click. Instead of a click, I say okay. And that marks the correct behavior for my dog. And the same as with a clicker signals for her that the reward is coming. I will hopefully not ever lose my voice. It's always with me. It's not something I can forget or drop somewhere and then I don't have my training tool. And another thing about a clicker is that it's rather impersonal. I can see how it's a great tool for training animals who don't normally bond with people, such as dolphins or even alligators, wild animals. But our dogs are different. They are so in tune with your emotions that when you train them, you can definitely use it to your training goals advantage, and your training will go a lot faster and it also will be a lot more fun. I have seen people attempt to clicker train complex behaviors such as a retrieve, and it is mind-numbingly boring sitting there and watching them trying to purely shape that behavior. Whereas a retrieve is something that can be so much fun to train with your dog. So yes, I love the concept of the clicker, but not necessarily its application when it comes to dog training. The next lesson that I learned from my own experience as well is I do not give treats to my dogs in the house. I have made this mistake with my very first dog, Lotta, where I would give her bits and pieces of treats or food while I was cooking or when we were eating dinner, and doing so quickly made her into a beggar. I hate to admit that, and I find it highly annoying. So I simply have made it a rule: no treats in the house at all. When we train outside, and so my dogs know that that time is when they will get treats. Other than that, they know perfectly well that they just need to wait until their feeding time, and that creates such a more pleasant existence for me with my dogs. For example, one time when I was sick, my lovely husband brought me lunch to bed. I was in bed all day and I could enjoy it without my dog like jumping all over it or even looking at it. She was just laying on the bed with me with a full understanding that that's not for her, and we have no conflict. I didn't have to tell her no, go, stop, none of that. She just was resting like normal, and I feel like it is something that I will always do with my dogs, is just to only reserve treats for training. The next lesson I had to learn, and it was difficult for me, is in contrast with the positive methods such as using a clicker and treats. I simply had to learn to not be afraid to give a meaningful correction to my dog. Your level of correction has to be higher than the dog's desire to misbehave. Some dogs are so mild-mannered that you hardly ever have to correct them at all, if ever. But strong, driven, working dogs, sometimes there comes a time when they need a check, and it's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person and it doesn't make you cruel towards your dog. It makes you a good trainer who is able to compassionately and clearly show your dog what is white, what is black, and where we belong. It is much more fair to make things clear to your dog fast and move on to positive training fast, instead of constantly nagging at your dog, or especially instead of limiting their lives because they are too difficult to handle in certain situations. So yeah, that is something I had to learn. And the next lesson is again in contrast to that, and that is that I am not afraid to spoil my dogs. Our dogs are creatures of comfort, and they deserve a comfy bed and lots of quality times with us and yummy quality foods. So I do anything and everything in my power to make sure that my dogs' lives are full and rich. And that actually also meant for me to reduce the number of dogs that I have. I have 3 right now, and that is my limit. Another dog would make me have to divide my time unfairly among them, I feel like. So yes, as long as your discipline is on point, spoiling your dog is also okay. And I feel like having a respectful and clear relationship with my dogs is what enables me to also spoil them in various ways. And that includes quality time and being able to take them on trips with me because they are well behaved. Proper socialization will make or break your dog. I believe for puppies it's even more important than obedience training. You can raise the best dog of your life by socializing them properly, or you can harm their ability to bond with humans if you allow too much dog playtime when they're young. Or you can even end up with a fearful or even aggressive dog if you fail to expose them to a variety of sights, sounds, and experiences. So in my opinion, committing to properly socializing your puppy and actually putting a conscious effort into it can make a huge difference in your relationship with your dog and also your dog's future and their ability to cope with all the variety of the human world that they will have to come across at some point. The next one you might not necessarily want to hear, but hear me out. Dogs are not babies. They are not fur babies. They are opportunistic predators. And because they are who they are, opportunistic pack animals, they are able to form really strong, lifelong bonds with people. And that's what makes them so awesome. They will love you regardless of your status, your looks, your drinking habit, of how much money you have. They are in it with you no matter what. And this unconditional love that we value in our dogs so much, it actually comes from them being a pack predator. Because being a predator in a pack required them to evolve sophisticated communication systems. And that's what makes them such awesome companions for us as well. So I feel like it's only fair to afford your dog the life that is species appropriate and that is breed appropriate, and honor them in a way that helps them thrive instead of trying to fight against their nature, such as some people try to make their dogs vegetarians. So as far as enrichment goes and nutrition goes, let's honor our dogs for who they are and give them the best lives that we possibly can. And so on that note, the next lesson that I learned is very hard, but that is because dogs are so awesome. This one might surprise you down the road because you might find yourself mourning the loss of your dog much harder than that of many relatives. The bond that we form with our dogs and the unconditional love that they give us is priceless. And yes, it comes at a price of having to say goodbye. When my first dog died, I would still cry. Like 6 years later, someone asked me about her and I still burst into tears, even though she lived a long life. So don't feel bad or guilty about it. It's normal because the bond and the connection that we form with our dogs is on another level. And that is why I'm on a mission of helping doggy guardians like yourself to make our dogs' lives happy, nurtured, and fun for as long as we can. I'm hoping you will join me on this journey.